On April 20th of last year, so over nearly a year now, this coming Friday will be a year, so nearly a year ago, Rock Township was notified by Mr. Boger. He is the administrator of BNDD. Mr. Boger, he faxed us a notice saying that our license had lapsed. At that time, I contacted legal counsel Dennis Tustrow, because he was our legal counsel at that time. Our medical director, who's Dr. Gibson through St. Anthony's Medical Center, and of course the chairman of our board. Immediately we began preparing for the registration. In conclusion of several hours of coordinating various paperwork and documents that they required, a settlement agreement was finalized by our legal counsel.
But the rest of it is an accurate statement of law. It's required to have the registration, and if you let it expire, then you are in violation of those statutes. So it's an ugly statement, but it's a correct statement of law. So it's an important thing that not happen again.
The settlement agreement was signed and finalized on April the 22nd. The total cost of legal services, no offense to Legman Law Firm, was 8.25 hours, and that was a total of $1,031.25. In 2003 was the first time our license had lapsed, and there was a change of medical directors at St. Anthony's Medical Center. At that time, it was Dr. Alborn, and he dissolved his relationship with St. Anthony's, and then we went to Dr. Chris Bashi, and the registration was then renewed. In 2006 was the next incident that occurred, and the same thing happened again. There was no, the card was mailed to our 1800 Londell, which we did not receive again because we didn't have a mailbox.
Yes,
the other ones are worse.
Part of what you're saying that concerns me, or that I question, is that it sounds to me that from your explanation that the medical director at St. Anthony's has some culpability. Is that an accurate statement that I made? Who's responsible for making sure the narcotics license is renewed every year?
Board of Directors is ultimately.
Well, I read it in the bylaws and I thought it was, maybe I'm mistaken, but in the bylaws I thought it was the chief, and then she reports it to the board.
I mean, we don't do the
legwork.
general operations,
Sure.
but
I guess part of
everybody has
the
boss.
settlement
We're the
agreement,
boss.
then she signed that, you know.
The short answer, you didn't ask me, but the short answer is that the chief's responsible for the removal of the licenses. That's the short answer. Now,
Right.
of course,
But
the medical director does have to make sure that the chief does it too, but that's just like the board has to make sure the chief does it.
This is really bad. I mean, it makes this look really dumb. And the biggest thing is that I feel like you're pushing the blame off on other people. And I still want to know, and maybe legal counsel can interject, because at the time, were these people liable for this? I mean, could they be held liable?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because you'd have to have a certain amount of knowledge that the license was expired.
Right.
As far as the rank and file,
What about her? Could she admit?
I don't know the answer to that. According to the bylaws, the chief is the person responsible for licensing, and we wanted to get it signed as quickly as possible, so instead of waiting for the board meeting and getting some sort of formal approval of the board, we went ahead and recommended that she go ahead and sign for the district because she's responsible for licensing. She signs the license. So this was essentially a renewal of the license through a settlement agreement. So she signed it so we can get it going, so there's as little of a loss in time as possible. We had a meeting that night, and then we can talk about that in closed session. And then we had a meeting on May 27th when Chief Sandwich's father passed away. The initial notification from BNDD came in April 17th to the chief. And then they sent a follow-up, and she immediately contacted them, immediately gave them an inventory of the controlled substances because they requested that. On the 20th, she got a more formal notice from BNDD that had exhibits attached to it. She immediately faxed that day faxed it to our office. We got it about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Prior to May 27th, at the board meeting, they were made aware of the settlement agreement, and copies were made available for that distribution at that meeting. according to the minutes, all board members were present. Director Meyer was available on the phone. Unfortunately, I was absent that night. My dad passed away. The executive session minutes were compiled by Deputy Chief Buckeye and legal counsel Mark Bishop. So I was absent at that meeting due to the death of my father.
You know, part of what concerned me about this when, you know, I read this article is just that it sounds to me like we're trying to pass the buck off to someone else and no one here has accepted responsibility for their action. And then I also had an issue when I saw the settlement agreement that we never got a copy of that.
Well, I had made copies and made them available before I had left. I left around noon, 1 o'clock to go to Cape Girardeau. I had them available here to be submitted that night in executive session.
Which they were or not?
I wasn't in executive session because my dad died.
Okay.
So
Well,
the
but
deputy
who-
chief
They were signing here.
and Dennis Tessrow.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
the
but then
deputy
if you
chief-
had them stacked up and you knew that they weren't distributed, when you got back, they'd have been sitting on your desk. and
They
you
were
would
not
give
on
them
my
to
desk.
somebody.
They were not on
So
my desk.
somebody took them. They vanished. I mean, it concerns me that the transparency here, maybe we need a transparency policy. And whenever you sign something, that we get it.
That would be fine, I'd be happy.
I mean, I just don't get it. Like, how am I finding out about this by a call from the leader? And then when you read that thing, we've got Class C felonies and all this other crap in there. And I'm like, what is this? Like, am I gonna get sued for something? Are you, are they? I mean, that's unacceptable to me. And we just, I mean, that's the
It
whole.
doesn't need to be minimized, and I think that's where it is right now, it's being
Yeah,
minimized.
you're
and that needs to stop.
you're
It should
blaming
not
the
be
deputy
minimized.
chief, the crew chiefs, the medical director.
I'm just explaining how the process
Well, but the
works.
process is it's your responsibility and you haven't taken it. It's happened 3 times, Margie. I'm upset. I was upset when I got that. I don't need these calls from these people asking me all these questions about something I have no clue is what kind of settlement agreement we entered into. You know, or the ramifications really.
Well,
I mean, did
called-
we put these people in a bad position or not?
I mean, I called
for 2
Chairman
full
Ott
years
and
and
talked to
then-
legal counsel when it was going on to try to decide what they should do about the settlement agreement. We didn't have a board meeting immediately at that time, and I was directed to go ahead and sign the settlement agreement to get everything activated. So I did as the chairman of the board and legal counsel suggested I do, and then I made it available for the very next meeting. And unfortunately, I wasn't there.
It was discussed in executive session, Dan, because Dennis Tessrow
Let's,
presented.
I hate
Go
to
ahead.
stop the discussion, but I have to caution and not to talk about closed session discussions in open session.
So.
But, because we have a closed session discussion.
But maybe you can help me, because doesn't this fall underneath the sunshine law where we have to
The,
tell the
Everything-
public?
everything you've talked about so far is public record. The agreement is a public record. I confirmed that with, when the leader was requested through the sunshine law, I confirmed that with the Department of Health, that they didn't consider it confidential either, and we released it at the meeting.
So how is our
yes.
public, how is our district, other than the leader, how are they being notified? Is this not on our website? Is this not,
Well, this is, I mean,
This
well,
just came out today.
as far as what? As far as
as far
when
as
it
the
happened?
settlement?
I don't want to talk about the closed session discussions in open session is what I'm saying,
Okay.
okay?
But the settlement
But
agreement
if you wanna
is
talk
public
about-
record.
Absolutely. It's been
Okay,
released
because
to
there is
the
no
public.
litigation pending.
There was never any litigation.
Right. So then that's my problem. Why was that initially discussed in executive session?
Because there was a potential for litigation and it
Okay.
invites the council.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because we
And
had a
then
situation
did
where we had
council,
last license.
did council, when the settlement agreement was signed, instruct Chief Sammons or tell her that we should get a copy of it?
Yes.
We didn't get a copy.
I'm sorry, I wasn't at the meeting, I made them available. I don't know what else to say, I
How
wasn't
are they
there.
made available?
I had the copies, I had
Who
my,
did you hand them to?
I had
Who
them
did you
laying
instruct?
here, I
Who
had
did
them
you
laying
hand
here.
them to give to us?
I had them laying here available because I left quickly to go
Who
to
did you
San.
instruct to give them to us?
Well, they were available with the other stuff for the board meeting. I'm saying, did I give them to you, Deputy Chief?
This is my first time reading this. I don't get the leader until Thursday. So I'm just skimming through it, but it says it's a courtesy to
Mhm.
get the
Postcard,
postcard. So
correct.
we're that dependent on a courtesy?
Well, that's the way it happens, they mail the postcard, so.
But the answer is yes, sir. And we should,
I think
and
that
we
needs to change. I
should,
think that
and we
needs to
should be,
change.
Kristen, you know,
Yeah.
I agree with you, you know, and that's what, you know, you should have your monthly, your annual planner out there.
I don't want it to be
Consistent
behind us. I don't want it to be behind us. I think that this needs to be more than a learning tool and something needs to be put in place and there needs to be consequences. I don't want this behind us. I want the reporters to ask questions. I want
Well,
this to be posted on the walls of buildings because this is, I don't think, acceptable.
Any other discussion on D and
So
DD?
just out of curiosity, if I can ask one more question, how are the employees, because first and foremost, this really affects the employees as much as the district and the residents. So how were they notified about this, this situation?
I didn't notify them because it was an executive session. And so that was the direction of legal counsel, because it was an executive session item. I wasn't allowed until today to speak publicly about it.
When you found out that the license had expired or wasn't renewed, did you think to yourself that that might be something that there should have been some sort of notification to the staff?
Dennis Tesser and I believe, talked about that, and not at that time.
Was it at the time that the license expired, were we in violation of the law, and should we have been administering narcotic pain medication?
Well, let's say that for a closed session. If you don't mind.
Why did you guys say no to the closed session?
There's nothing to discuss, no comment.
No comment.
You guys just said that you guys were going to discuss all this stuff in closed session, but yet you guys,
I didn't say I don't want to discuss anything in closed session.
but you didn't bring anything up or object to that when they were saying that.
My mom's in the future.
No comment? No comment from you either?
No comment.
No comment. How about you, Mr. Ott? Comment?